in a million years.
You know how the old adage goes that time heals all wounds? A great example of this is without a doubt 2013's Devil May Cry reboot. Back when Capcom had that whole marketing strategy to appeal more to Western audiences at the outset of the 2010s, they handed over a lot of their IPs to Western developers. For Devil May Cry, their eyes were set on Ninja Theory, and it's understandable as to why. They had great production values with their games that were able to capture some great character performances, all the while having a pretty good grasp on what makes for engaging combat, but it seems that with DmC, the final result turned out to be the other way around. Perhaps it had to do a lot with fan expectation due to the series and their characters having already been established and beloved by many, as it felt like a lot of the line delivery came off very awkwardly.
Like guns?
But the main discrepancy involved Dante's characterization and Ninja Theory's co-founder's idea of what a cool character should be clashing, often showcased as blatant disrespect to past iterations of the character, as well as this new iteration being a pretty shameless self-insert, further creating a disconnect with lifelong fans of the series. But a lot of that was alleviated by providing some of the funnest combat I've ever seen in any action game. Ninja Theory was also responsible for breaking some of the conventions that the series was clinging to so strongly that some of these antiquated features began to become synonymous with the brand. For example, the static camera system, which was still in use in the previous Devil May Cry, that shared the same console generation as the reboot. Japanese developers had a really tough time developing for Unreal Engine 3, which was a prevalent game engine developed for the 7th generation of consoles. Luckily, Ninja Theory already had some expertise with the engine, allowing for some flexibility in experimenting with new concepts and mechanics.
Your point?
By eschewing the voyeuristic camera angles of the past, the free camera system made it possible to concentrate more on creating engaging environments and some of the best level designs the series has ever seen. Although many would contend that the combat lacks the skill expression found in some of the other Devil May Cry titles, I feel like the reboot struck a better balance between the two, fleshing out both combat and environments, which lends itself to a more traditional action game feel, rather than merely going through the niche motions Devil May Cry created for itself. It took risks and sought out to course correct some of Devil May Cry's misgiving mechanics, such as its platforming. Every Devil May Cry title has always had this half-hearted insistence on these platforming sections to punctuate the fights, but because of the fixed camera and lack of environmental design overall, these sections feel like the equivalent of clasping a necklace behind your neck by your lonesome. Ninja Theory actually managed to make platforming a prime component of its overall design, playing a larger role in just about everything you do, including boss fights, which made it feel like a natural extension of Dante's arsenal. The control scheme itself feels like a better extension of both the player and avatar. Every input binding has such a natural and purposeful placement, and weapon switching is so much more haptic and intuitive than it's ever been because of the game's button buffering-like design. Call it a skill issue, but I never could get used to the cycling weapon wheel that even Devil May Cry 5 uses for some reason. I'm sure you've heard by now by many that the real playthrough of a Devil May Cry game doesn't actually start until you're on your 3rd or 4th playthrough, and it's usually the unlocking of upgrades that is upholding your motivation to play the game for that long, but DmC allows for the first playthrough to be as winsome as its 5th, with its responsive controls and frenetic combat along with meticulously placed collectibles. The game even encourages multiple playthroughs, not by some paywalling of moves you feel like you should already have, but because some areas are initially inaccessible without a certain weapon or upgrade, further heightening the player's curiosity of its game world. The game world and lore aren't nearly as interesting as what came before or after, but I feel its additions are worth looking into. I love how they handle demons hiding in plain sight, manipulating the repressed humans. It adds a certain real-world commentary element to it. Chaotic limbo state makes the expensive platforming diegetic, and Dante's lineage of being half angel and half demon instead of Cambion makes for a streamlined feeling of playing two different characters without having to, well, play two different characters. It's the little things too that make up DmC's greatness. Take for example the little visual flares under the style ranks this time around, letting you know what moves and combos you're pulling off, followed by how many points those feats are granting you. Upgrades from the divinity statues saw an uptick as well, now letting you redistribute points however you see fit, as long as it's not the move's rooted upgrade, making your upgrade tree feel a lot more footloose. Enemy introductions, the style meter announcer, and slow motion finishers that were popularized in DmC 5 also originated in this game, since the reboot's development process was a huge influence on Itsuno-san. And last but certainly not least, I think the biggest catch of DmC is its inclusion of a standalone Virgil campaign. It succeeds the events of the main game and provides brand new areas and story to accompany Virgil's unique playstyle and personality. Usually Virgil is treated as somewhat of a guest character going through the exact same missions with little embellishments. Virgil is Itsuno's favorite, so you would think he would have his own reserved story missions. However, he even receives the same treatment in DmC 5 Special Edition, even though having his own missions would have made the most sense here. It's pretty head scratching how this is still an ongoing trend, and although Ninja didn't hold up their end of the deal by providing worthwhile writing for the character, at least they gave him the respect of having his own playable story, even if it takes no more than 3 hours to complete. This video's topic is all pretty subjective, and I'm sure you could come up with a whole slew of complaints for the game, even if your overall feelings on it are a net positive. If I could issue one glaring flaw about the game, it's that the title Devil May Cry doesn't really fit the story it's trying to convey. Crying has traditionally been displayed as the human trait that grounds Dante and defines his empathy. But here, Dante isn't human at all, and he doesn't really learn any valuable lessons about caring for more than himself and maybe Kat. You could argue Dante's growth in empathy would have been expanded upon with a sequel that was rumored to be in development, but I guess that game and its further answers will forever be stuck in limbo. I also recall that when the game's definitive edition was released, people's perceptions on it began to change, so perhaps it had many features that satisfied a lot of demand. I wouldn't know since I've only played my 360 and Steam ports of the game, but maybe I should check it out if it provides significant enough changes that locked on public opinion. Although this game has always been looked at as some illegitimate middle child of the series, I came to terms with the reboot a long time ago, and playing it a lot recently made me appreciate it that much more, especially considering that we got the somewhat conclusive Devil May Cry 5 that possibly may not have happened if it wasn't for this game's existence. I really appreciate the leaps and strides Devil May Cry 2013 took, even if it didn't quite stick the landing.